I never imagined I'd end up as the bad guy in someone else's control freak fantasy. But that's exactly what happened when Laura Hensley took over as president of our homeowners association 3 months ago. My name's Ethan, and I've lived in Pinecrest Heights for 8 years without a single hiccup. My house isn't the grandest around, but I keep it in good shape, pay my dues on time, and generally keep to myself. That is, until Laura decided my front yard was her personal mission. It all kicked off with a letter slipped into my mailbox, notice of violation, unapproved landscaping modification. I read it, totally baffled. The only change I'd made was a small flower bed along my walkway, planted with native wildflowers to draw in bees and butterflies. According to the notice, I'd failed to get approval for altering my lawn, breaking some obscure rule in Covenant Section 7.3, Paragraph 12. It ordered me to rip out the garden or face daily fines. I figured I'd handle it like an adult. The next day, I grabbed my landscaping sketches and some photos, then headed to the community center where Laura held her weekly office hours. I knocked, and she peered up from her laptop, her glasses teetering on the tip of her nose. "Ethan Caldwell, from Maple Drive, right?" she asked, her tight-lipped smile not even close to friendly. "That's me," I said, sliding the notice across her desk. "I got this about my flower bed. Can we talk it over?" I checked the bylaws, and small native plantings under 20 square feet don't need approval. Her smile vanished like I'd flipped a switch. "Since I took over, I've been reviewing all the rules, and we're enforcing them correctly now. That flower bed of yours is a blight on property values." She spat out "flower bed" like it was a curse word. I kept my cool. "It's within the size limit, uses approved plants, and it's tidy. I've got proof it meets the rules." Laura snatched the notice and shoved it back at me. "The board's ruling is final, Mr. Caldwell. Get rid of it by Friday, or the fines start at $50 a day." She turned back to her screen, clearly done with me. I should have seen then that reason wasn't going to cut it with Laura, but I'm a CIVYL engineer by trade. Fixing things logically is what I do. That night, I emailed the full HOA board with my EVY Denke, pointing out the exemption for small native gardens. 2 members replied, saying my setup looked great and followed the rules. I thought that'd settle it. I couldn't have been more wrong. Come Monday, I got home from work to find a landscaping crew tearing up my yard. Half my flower bed was already gone, petals strewn across the grass. Laura stood at the edge of my property, arms folded, watching the chaos with a smug grin. I jumped out of my car, heart racing, and strode over. "What's going on here?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay level. "Enforcing compliance," Laura said, dripping with self-satisfaction. "You had your chance to fix this. Since you didn't, the HOA can step in and charge you for its Section 12.4 of the covenant." "You can't do this," I shot back, pulling out my phone to show the emails. 2 board members said I'm fine. Laura waved me off. "As president, I've got emergency powers when violations hurt the community. Your little planting experiment is dragging down the whole street's curb appeal." The workers shifted awkwardly, caught between her orders and my protests. I asked them to hold off while I called the board, but Laura stepped in front of me. "Keep going," she barked at them. "Mr. Caldwell, interfering with HOA business could mean more fines. Back off." That's when I noticed something weird. The crew wasn't just removing my flowers, they were digging deep, nearly 2 feet in places. "What are they actually doing?" I demanded. "Installing proper landscaping," Laura replied with fake cheer. "Uniform St. Augustine sod, per community standards. Your sprinklers will need tweaking too. All billed to you naturally." Now I was seriously worried. No one signed off on this. "You can't redo my yard without permission." "Actually, I can," she said. As president, I cut her off. "Even as president, you need board approval for anything over due law 500. This is way past that." A flash of irritation crossed her face. "The board gave me discretion for beautification projects. This counts." She turned away, conversation over. I stepped back and dialed Sarah, the HOA treasurer who'd backed my garden. She was floored and said she'd come right over. Meanwhile, the workers paused at one spot, looking puzzled. Their supervisor, a young guy, walked up to Laura. "Ma'am, we've hit something underground. It's not on our plans, could be a utility line." Laura didn't blink. "Work around it. We're on a timeline." He hesitated. "We should check what it is first." "Could be gas." I said, "Work around it." She snapped. Then we heard it, a sharp hiss from the hole. The crew backed off fast, the Super VY sore yelling to clear out. The sound grew louder. Is that gas? Laura asked, her smugness faltering. I edged closer, keeping my distance, and knew instantly. That's not gas. That's my main water line. And you've just busted it. Within minutes, water gushed out, turning my yard into a swamp. The pressure sent muddy jets skyward as the workers scrambled to save their gear. Laura stood there, frozen, her fancy heels sinking into the muck. This is why you don't dig without utility checks, I said, grabbing my phone. I'm calling 911 before this messes up the whole neighborhood's water. Laura snapped out of it. Don't you dare. This is HOA business, we'll deal with it. She fumbled for her phone, probably to call some crony plumber. A busted main line isn't your call, Laura. It's a public emergency, I said, dialing. As an engineer who deals with city systems, I knew the stakes. 15 minutes later, emergency crews and the water company rolled up. My yard was a lake, and water streamed toward the storm drains. Neighbors gathered, phones out, filming the mess. Laura tried whispering to them, spinning her story, but they were too busy gawking. The utility team shut off our street's water and started digging in. A tech named Carla pulled me aside. This is a bad break, she said. And it looks like no one called for utility locates before digging. That's illegal. I nodded. The HOA president ordered this without my okay or permits. Carla's eyebrows shot up. Well, someone's in for a big fine. We'll need statements. When Carla questioned Laura, the confidence melted away. Laura flailed her arms, pointing at me, trying to dodge blame, but the facts didn't let you greenlit this disaster. As the water crew worked, a cop showed up for statements. I laid it out straight. My compliant garden, the board's support, Laura's rogue excavation. The crew boss confirmed she'd hired them and pushed them to keep going after hitting the line. Sir, the officer told me you've got a case here: unauthorized digging, property damage, utility tampering. Serious stuff. Laura overheard and stormed over, red-faced. This is absurd. I was upholding community standards. If anyone's complaining, it's me about his ugly flowers. The cop stayed calm. Ma'am, HOA power doesn't override city laws. You dug without permits or utility checks, and now there's major damage. By then, more neighbors and board members had shown up, stunned. Sarah, the treasurer, came to me. Ethan, I had no clue she'd pull this. The board didn't okay any digging. That night, my water was back on, but my yard was a wreck. The water company pegged the repair at due law $1,700, plus a due law $10,000 fine against the HOA for digging without marking utilities. 3 days later, at an emergency HOA meeting, the room was packed. Laura sat up front, trying to look composed. When my turn came, I stuck to the truth. My garden was legal, Laura overstepped, and her stunt cost us big. I've talked to an HOA lawyer, I finished. Her actions put us all on the hook. That due law $10,000 fine? That's due law $200 per household if we pay it from the fund. The crowd buzzed with anger. A retired judge stood up. I move for a vote of no confidence in the president, he said. And I move that Laura Hensley personally pay all fines and damages, not the community. Laura went pale. You can't do this. I was protecting our standards. The vote was almost unanimous. She was out and stuck with the due law $10,000 fine, due law $1,700 repair, and due law $3,500 to fix my yard. As people left, Laura sat there, dazed, then hissed. This is a witch hunt. My lawyer will fix this, especially you, Ethan. I just smiled. I think we're done here, Laura. Next meeting's the first Tuesday of next month. I hear they're discussing a native plant program. You might learn something. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the bulletin board crashed down, a perfect end to her HOA tyranny.